Hey everybody, it's Will. We're back with another edition of Creators Outlet here on the podcast. We'd like to welcome our special guest, David Pepose, with yet again another big project. Before we get into it, we want to give a big shout out to our sponsor for this video, SpinWiz Comics at spinwizcomics.com. They are available both on iOS and Android. You can download the app. It is a free destination for both web and indie comics. You can check out a whole bunch of free comics. And what's better than free comics, especially if you're on the West Coast and locked down and you've read all your books and you're waiting for the first release of 2021 from David. You can have something else to read for absolutely free. Go download the app today, and here's what it'll look like on your smart device. And now on with the program. Since we've talked last, Creators Outlet is also available on Age of Radio. I got picked up and from episode 40 up on through are all available for download. So this episode will be available for download later on tonight. Awesome. So you can go to ageofradio.org, click on shows, and you will see my silly icon, and you can just click on that, and there are a whole bunch of shows there. I think various podcasts of mine have been downloaded over 164 times, and I just started uploading the middle of last month, so it's going pretty well. So if you're watching over there, if you're listening to this on the link from Age of Radio and you downloaded the audio version of the podcast, you can head over to Joker Fan Pop Culture Talk on YouTube and see the video. Just saying. So David, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to catch up and chat with you about a new series I've got coming out this January.
Yes, the first series of 2021, the very first new comic book day.
Yep. I'm teaming up with Aftershock Comics on a new series called Scout's Honor, which is the story of after a nuclear war, a cult rises from the ashes, and their Bible is an old Boy Scout manual. So our series follows Kit, who is kind of really the embodiment of all good things about the Ranger Scouts of America. There's only one hitch. The Ranger Scouts are very male driven. That's part of their 7 Scout commandments. And so Kit has had to hide her identity as a woman in order to pursue her calling as a Ranger Scout. And when Kit discovers a really kind of disturbing secret at the heart of the Ranger Scout doctrine, she's going to kind of lose her religion a bit. And she's going to have to risk everything she's ever known and loved on this dangerous quest for the truth. So I've kind of described this book as Mad Max meets Mulan, with a little bit of Handmaid's Tale and a little bit of Hunger Games thrown in for good measure. But yeah, it's, when it's the end of the world, you have to be prepared for anything. And Kit is going to have to really take that lesson to its extreme.
Well, that sounds a bit real for the times we're living in.
For sure. It's funny. When I was writing a post-apocalyptic book, or at least when I pitched it initially a little over a year ago, I don't think I was expecting for it to be like a documentary. This was my pandemic book in a lot of ways. I'd been knocking on the doors over at Aftershock for a long time, since my first book came out, Spencer and Locke. And, I had been pitching them a lot of different concepts in a lot of different series. I pitched them Going to the Chapel. I pitched them DOZ. I pitched them Grand Theft Astro. And as time would go on, I would keep connecting with the same Aftershock people at different conventions. I've known Mike Martz since I was in college. I interned for him at DC Comics. We worked on Batman R.I.P. together. I've known Steve Rotterdam, also from my time at DC. Lee Kramer lives in the same city as me. We've had lunch before. And what happened was Lee's big mistake was telling me pitch us as many things as you want. So I sent him like a dozen log lines. And Scout's Honor was that was the idea that I had just come up with. It was the latest idea, the idea of history being kind of like a game of telephone. It's not just written by the victors, it's written by the survivors in this case. And what happens when that game of telephone gets just totally cut off? You're in a brand new dark ages, and the only real tie you have to the past happens to be, in this case, a Boy Scout manual. By the time that the book was approved and greenlit around Christmas of last year, but we didn't really sign the paperwork until about 2 weeks before everything shut down. And so writing 80% of this book during a pandemic, during the lockdown, at first it was kind of sobering. You think as a writer, what's the kind of energy you want to put out into the world? I'm no Grant Morrison, but there is a little bit of magical thinking that goes into it where you think, if I write this sort of end of the world scenario, is that the sort of thing that I'm putting out into the world? But as I got into it, I realized that it was a story about hope. At the end of the day, it's not about being lost. It's about being found. It's about finding yourself and figuring out what your own direction is going to be. Scout's Honor is definitely the most spiritual book I've ever written. And I think it speaks to my upbringing in a lot of ways. I grew up in a very conservative, both religious and politically Jewish household in the Midwest, growing up. And my sort of the direction that I found myself in when I left home, I realized like, oh, there's two ways of looking at the whole world. And when you kind of go out on your own and you realize like, oh, all the things that I thought were so bedrock, maybe they're not quite as bedrock as I thought. Maybe there's a different way of approaching things and meeting different people with different backgrounds and different viewpoints. I consider that to be a real reawakening for me. And a lot of that journey has been channeled into Kit's trajectory in this book. I'm still a practicing Jew. I don't really talk about it a whole lot, as far as my career goes. But for me, I consider it my way of throwing a penny into the well of the universe, so to speak. There are a lot of people who died to do stuff that I kind of take for granted. So, for example, me not eating like pork or shellfish, that's just a small thing that I can do. But my spiritual path is very different than that of my parents and is very different than that of their parents. I think that's, I don't think that's even necessarily limited to the Jewish experience, but I think you have to find your own meaning. And that's something that Kit really has to find out. Another thing that really kind of inspired this story is my partner, she was raised Catholic, and she had a real kind of sense of disillusionment with the Catholic Church after everything came out about the sex abuse scandals. And she kind of really thought to herself, like, how can I stay a part of an organization that has this kind of corruption hidden underneath it? And I think that's a lot of what Kit goes through in this series. Is she says, I was raised a true believer. She believes in everything that the Ranger Scouts have to offer in terms of self-sufficiency and survival in this kind of bleak post-apocalyptic world. And how did she sort of navigate these values that she holds that are so important to her while navigating kind of the human element, the human institution that might not always have the ideas of truth and justice at its heart. But there's, it's also a post-apocalyptic book about a Boy Scout cult. So there's plenty of action in Scouts Honor as well. The thing that I like so much about this series is, like we said, this game of telephone. And so, for example, the merit badges, that's a really big, important thing in the Ranger Scout Society, because what skills the person next to you has just by looking at them. And so you have kind of the staples like archery and wilderness survival, but you've also got things like tactical driving and explosives. It's very much baked into their religion, or the idea of a big rite of passage in the society is you're given what's called your first switchblade. And the problem is that the game of telephone has been so distorted over the generations that the Ranger Scouts say, well, back in the olden times, these Ranger Scouts, the first Ranger Scouts got these giant swords that had these different types of blades embedded into the sword, one for shearing, another one like a can opener to break open armor. Some of them even have lighters on them. And so that's what they've built for themselves in the apocalypse, is these giant swords that happen to have different blades hidden inside of them. It's just, I think I gravitate towards concepts that have a lot of inherent imagery to them. Whether you look at Spencer and Locke, which deals with the funny pages, or go into the Chapel that dealt with weddings, the OZ that dealt with the Wizard of Oz. Scouts Honor is a really fun way to explore all those tropes and imagery from classic Boy Scouts and sort of really take them to their maybe illogical extreme, put them really kind of in the thick of things, sort of the irradiated horrors of the Colorado Badlands, and see what might sprout out of that.
I don't remember having a chance to get an exclusive badge when I was in the Scouts. Man, that would have been awesome.
It's like a mutation of the old, bottle rockets. For me, I never served as a Boy Scout, but my younger brothers did. And I think that was kind of the kernel that got this book going, is, and the inside for them, it's all about self-sufficiency and learning practical skills and the camaraderie with all your friends. On the outside, you see the costumes and the pageantry and the bylaws, and it can start to look a little culty. And that kind of built up this Ranger Scout religion. For example, the actual Boy Scouts, the real life Boy Scouts, have scout laws. It's sort of these pillars that sort of build up the ethics of the Scout Society. And so we mutated some of those into the 7 Scout laws of the Ranger Scouts. And some of the real life laws, things like you shall obey your Scoutmaster without question. It doesn't take a huge leap in logic to see how that might get twisted.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, it's also built just like, just if you look at the 10 Commandments, there's still sort of that code of ethics baked into it. A law like a Scout's honor must never be in question or always be prepared. On the face of it, those are very positive things. And we see sort of the bright side of that with Kit. But on the other hand, always be prepared when you're living in the apocalypse. That means she's kind of raised in this society. It's very cutthroat and ready to kind of throw you into the deep end with no warning, because they say, you need to be warned. You need to be prepared. And if you can't be prepared for this, you have no chance at surviving the outside world. And so it's very, it's very push and pull. There is sort of that element, like I said, it's of a cult, where it's sort of very positive reinforcement countered with, this very like life or death, bit of violence. And that's sort of the world that she's grown up believing in and understanding. And now after she kind of learns that this cult might not be on the up and up, she's going to have to kind of figure out what stays and what goes.
So right now I'm envisioning a scout with a scout's backpack, Batman's utility belt, and I don't know, like Conan's sword with a bottle opener attachment slung over her back, and
Uh,
I'm
yeah,
like,
it,
always be
it's
prepared to get thrown into the deep end. So there's going to be a rope and a grappling hook somewhere in this pack.
yes, yeah. Kit really favors the bow and arrow. That's sort of her weapon of choice. I really thought that was, this is all about self sufficiency, and so for her, I like the idea of she likes the finesse of it all, and she likes to be able to sort of take down an enemy or take down prey, you know, with the strength of her own two hands. But a lot of this book, it deals with different scouts deal with things in different ways. And so Kit's relationship with her best friend Des, who happens to be the scoutmaster's son, is a through line that really kind of weaves in and out of the story. Des has secrets of his own. I mean, I think if Scout's Honor is about anything in particular, it's about secrets and how they can be really corrosive, but it can also be just as painful to kind of rip the veil off and see the truth. So Des has secrets of his own, but he's kind of like the Loki to Kit's Thor. He doesn't know Kit's secret, but as we progress in the series, we find he's getting a little tired of being runner up, and he's tired of being second best. And so what starts off as this very tight friendship kind of devolves into an increasingly bitter rivalry. He doesn't know what Kit has discovered, and he doesn't even know that Kit is a woman. And Kit, in certain ways, has to kind of hold things back from her best friend, and that sort of spirals accordingly. But Des, he's the kind of guy, if Kit is all about the bows and arrows, he's about the flashier side of things. He's about, he's big on marksmanship. He's big on tactical driving. That's sort of his little rebellion against his very stern scoutmaster father. But yet he never seems to measure up. His father is a harsh guy, and I think he expects only the best from his son. And so when he keeps seeing only the best in Kit, that's something that really kind of turns the screws for Des. And we see other scouts like the Scoutmaster Shepard, who he's kind of the religious and political leader of this cult, and he's absolutely a true believer. He believes that he has to be harsh. He has to do it to kind of keep as many of his people alive as possible. It's been generations since the bombs fell, but this is still very much kind of a scarred wasteland. And there are a lot of things that can kill you, whether it's the environment, whether it's the monsters that are dwelling within the Badlands, or a gang of raiders that are known as the Highwaymen, who have been sort of methodically kind of picking off caravans and small towns all across the wasteland. And so Shepard is, it was interesting writing a cult leader for this book, where he's a hard guy, but he's charismatic in his way. And he's got kind of a little bit of the fire and brimstone to him, but it's all in the service of this greater ideal. The Scouts have viewed the original founder of the Ranger Scouts and sort of have turned him into this messianic prophet figure, Dr. Jefferson Hancock. He was the man who created the Ranger Scouts before the bombs fell. And so they've got statues of him all over the place. They've sort of taken his tenets and turned them into the 7 Scout Laws. And Shepard kind of sees himself as the latest channel for Dr. Hancock's wisdom. And so he's kind of the guy who says, what would Dr. Hancock want out of this? And like I said, I'm a practicing Jew. I don't say this to denigrate my religion, but I find that Judaism it's a very literary religion. there's a lot of room for interpretation for a lot of different things. And I mean, you can, there's no, it's a whole religion built on rabbis arguing with each other. So there's no two ways of interpreting anything. And I think that's what I've enjoyed about exploring the Scout religion, and especially through Shepherd, is finding different angles of meaning in the Scout religion. Our first issue actually has back matter explaining some of the different merit badges, which I believe are actually going to be available at local comic shops for fans to pick up. But things like, for example, the explosives merit badge, that's a cool beat in the actual story. But in the back matter, we get to explore, oh, well, the Scouts see explosives as almost a religious event, because that's the difference between the old world and the new world, is the bombs fell. And so explosives are things to be respected. They're things to be mastered. And, sometimes you need an explosive to get things done. But if you don't pay the proper respect, sort of this Old Testament judgment can come and blow up right in your face. And so that's been a really cool way to kind of build up this world a little bit, and sort of see, oh, there's a lot of different angles to kind of the Boy Scout pageantry that when you throw them into the sort of post-apocalyptic hellscape, you realize like, oh, things can get twisted in a really kind of profound and maybe even a little bit of a messed up way. And it just takes, one kind of bad moment for Kit to realize like, oh, this thing that I've been raised with, this thing that I've put so much value and importance on over the years, it's all wrong. And, most of my characters, for people who've read my books in the past, they're all about people who've been marinating in trauma for a long time. And then they kind of get called up to the plate and they have to do or die. Kit, we get to watch her experience her trauma in real time. And she's got to really kind of think on her feet and figure out, what's the truth here, and then figure out on the fly, where does she go next from here?
Well, so a couple of things came to mind.
Sure.
When you mentioned everything you said about explosives.
Yeah.
The imagery that went through my mind was the end of the second Planet of the Apes movie.
Sure.
They were all worshiping the nuclear bomb and in the shelter until they blew it up and somehow still had 3 more movies afterwards. And a cartoon series and comic books to this day. Yeah. And, it's all good. I love the Planet of the Apes, but, and I think without even reading it, I've already grown an attachment to Kit, because yet again, my weapon of choice is, various bows and arrows when I used to go hunting and, just in general, because it's like, well, if we're in, I don't know, post-apocalyptic, 2020, and you shoot a gun and somebody's coming at you and you shoot a gun and you miss, you're going to draw all the other zombies to your direction,
right?
Where in a case of various bows and arrows, it's more of a stealthy weapon.
Yes, that's exactly, like, I think Kit instinctively, and my artist and partner on this book, Luca Casalanguida, I had said to Luca, I really want to kind of portray Kit, pretty androgynously, because Kit kind of has to pass in the society. But she's obviously not going to grow up to be like a bulky kind of ripped guy. She's going to be a bit more wiry. It's a little bit of like a Kristen Stewart thing kind of going on. So I think, I felt like she was going to try to be more surgical with it all. I mean, Scouts are all pretty tough. Like they're thrown into the thick of things enough that they're kind of seen as like they're the most dangerous thing in the wasteland, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I feel like it's funny because this script has evolved or maybe mutated a lot over the development period. When I first pitched this to Aftershock, the idea of Kit being a woman, I didn't even actually pitch that to them at first. It just kind of hit me as I was coming up with the outline. Some of it was just to kind of diversify the cast a little bit. I feel like I tend to gravitate towards female leads in my action stories, going back to Ripley or Sarah Connor. And you see it in a lot of my work, with Going to the Chapel and the OZ and some other things that I have in the pipeline. But I think also some of it was this idea of secrets. The Ranger Scouts as a cult have a secret, and it's been kind of lost to history, and Kit is going to accidentally find it in our first issue. But the idea of sort of, well, what's another secret that our main character could be kind of holding on to and could be kind of, eating away at them from the inside. And I realized I could kind of solve one problem with the other. It's being like, well, this doesn't have to be a book just about boys. This could be, we could have the lead be a woman, and that's sort of the thing she's hiding, is that she has to kind of conceal a big part of herself in order to pursue what she considers her true calling. And that's always going to have, some internal conflict. She's always going to be at loggerheads in some capacity. And that I think kind of makes for a little bit of a compelling character. She's in certain ways, she's kind of like the best of the best. The Scoutmaster keeps telling Des, why can't you be more like your friend Kit? And Kit, yeah, exactly. and nobody except Kit's dad knows. And so it's just it's she's a fun character to follow. In certain ways, she definitely has a quality that I think a lot of my main characters share, which is just being super stubborn. I think that's a quality that I always value. That's certainly something that has embodied my career, as being stubborn. But yeah, I think also just she's in certain ways not quite, for somebody who's grown up in the apocalypse, she's almost not as tough as some of my other characters. And I think it's because maybe she has a degree of naivete where she has been growing up thinking like, I'm going to be a Ranger Scout. I'm going to sort of fulfill, what Dr. Hancock, what his values were. And when she sort of gets cut off at the knees spiritually, she's going to spend a lot of time being like, what did I just see? Like, did I even see what I think I just saw? And then kind of figuring out like, oh man, I need to like confirm this. And then, as she's sort of digging a little bit deeper into this society, she's going to realize like, oh, this place is a lot more dangerous than I thought when I'm not on the winning side. And so she's really going to have to not just survive the wasteland, but she really kind of has to survive her own brothers in arms. And so yeah, she's really going to have to put every ounce of training to the test. And I think that's the only way she's going to survive. But I think the only way that she's really going to come out intact emotionally is she's really going to have to kind of reconcile these values that she still believes in with sort of what has gone on in the Ranger Scouts name. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. I think everybody has had a moment in their lives, whether it's religiously or politically, or even, just the fabric of their own families, where something that they believed to be true, something that was sort of so, such an embodiment of their personal fabric, and they get the rug pulled out from under them. And it's very disorienting, and where do you go from there? I think that's sort of a question that we can all relate to some capacity. And I think that's the human element behind sort of the post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cult fun action. That's really the heart that drives Scouts Honor. And whether or not you can kind of find a happy ending out of all that.
Well, right away, I need all these badges so I can put them on a shirt. So
yes, I believe we have 12 merit badges. 12 badges. 12 or 14. I don't remember the final count. But yes, we have some behind the scenes info on all of them that you'll get to read in our first issue.
And it comes out
January 6th. Yes.
The first new comic book day of 2021.
Yeah, and you can actually pre-order our first 2 issues now. You can issue 1, you can pre-order through next Monday. I believe that's December 14th. The pre-order code is NOV for November 200 994. And you can also pre-order our second issue right now. You can tell your local comic shop, or you can tell them to add all 5 issues to your pull list. Issue 2's code is DEC for December 201133.
You've got sticky notes on your computer, don't you?
Yes. I just opened up my Twitter feed to get those numbers out. But yeah, it's been a really wonderful experience working with Aftershock. Like I said, it's been a long time coming. I've known Mike and Steve Rotterdam for over a decade. Lee Kramer has probably gotten sick of me at conventions saying, "Hey, let me pitch you some more stuff." Working with Christina Harrington, my other editor on this book, she has been terrific. She's honestly been one of the single best editors I've ever worked with. Christina really kind of championed this book from the pitch stage on, and has been just really wonderful to work with. She's really she's been the one who's really fine-tuned a lot of elements to the book, and has really made it just a better series for her work on it. And working with people, this has been a very different book also, because for me, it's been an exercise in letting go a bit. Because most books that I've worked on in the past, I've been the editor. So I've had to kind of hand select every element of those books. And that can be a little stressful. Scouts Honor, in a lot of ways, has just as much in common with a Big Two environment as it does creator owned. And I think that's, having Mike and Christina, who are both Marvel alums, working as editorial, that makes a lot of sense. But it was a big learning curve for me, realizing that, I'm not the central editorial conduit anymore. I'm so used to sort of, if I see something that I want to tweak in a thumbnail, for example, I'll reach out to the guy directly and say, hey, can we fix this? Instead, I'm running notes through editorial, and it's been a good lesson in sort of figuring out like what needs to get fixed for the sake of the story, and what's a hill that I really don't need to die on, or what's a hill that we are running the clock on deadline. Is there a workaround for it? And even just the selection of my teammates. I've never had a creative team match made for me before, which has been a really fun experience. Mike and Christina, found my artist and partner on this, Luca Casalinguida, who ironically I had actually reached out to years ago for another project, and the schedules just didn't align. Luca's terrific. I can't say enough great things about him. He's got a style that it reminds me of Joe Kubert by way of Jock. Very expressive, a lot of drama with a little bit of sharp edges underneath it all. And the cool thing is that Luca portrays Kit, very thoughtfully. He really kind of, the quiet moments is where he really, really excels. But then he shifts gears the moment that there's any action. And suddenly you get a lot of shadow and you get a lot of mood. And suddenly you remember Kit is badass. Like, she is not the person you want to be at the wrong end of a dark alley with. And seeing her cut loose during these big action sequences has been really fun to watch. Or getting colorist Matt Milla on board. You might know him from his work on Daredevil. Christina was the one who brought Matt on board. And I remember being so thrilled because I was just like, oh, we were allowed to get him. He's a big deal. And the way that he and Luca's work have interacted with each other has been a really cool kind of eclectic mix. You never really forget that you're in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, that everything's a little radioactive. And then Carlos Manguel as our letterer, who he has done some really cool and interesting work in this series. I'm very old school and conservative when it comes to my lettering. You sort of hear the good lettering's invisible. And Carlos has instead actually really added his own nice sense of texture to this book. And it's a way of sort of just reinforcing that kind of post-apocalyptic element of the series in one more capacity, one more dimension. And it's just been really cool to watch him work. And then we've got our cover. We're working with Andy Clark and colorist Jose Villarrubia on covers, and they are just terrific. I can't wait for issue 2 to finally go out in the wild. I should ask my editors if I can show that off next week. But the covers that Andy and Jose have been turning in have been just really gorgeous and pitch perfect, and just really kind of shows. I think they really reinforce how logical this idea of a Boy Scout cult would be. I mean, it's really tied into this concept of toxic masculinity, I think. And, sort of.
Uh-oh. We have been frozen. There we go. We're going to see if I can get David back. Let's see. I got to take my glasses off to look at my keyboard. Sorry about this disruption.
I don't know if you can see me. Okay, so sorry about that. My internet just cut out mid-sentence.
I feel your pain. Welcome back. I had to take my glasses off to type. You froze and dropped from the broadcast.
Yeah,
coming back in.
I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I was on a roll and I forgot what I was just saying because I just saw my internet just cut out. The way that Andy and Jose have really been able to kind of fit in design wise, sort of this intersection between, the Boy Scout paraphernalia and this kind of cult imagery, this big statue of Dr. Jefferson Hancock with his two tablets with the 7 Scout laws. And then, sort of the tattered American flag waving in the background. It all really kind of fits together in a way that might be almost a little uncomfortably prescient in a way. Because I think the seeds for this Boy Scout cult exist today. There's sort of this drive to, this sort of hyper masculine drive. You see it in our multimedia, you see it in our entertainment, you see it in, the way we want our body image to go and gender roles to go. And, I think that can turn toxic really fast. And then sort of when you take it over the course of hundreds of years with no real sense of history to correct that. And if anything, the only sense of history the Ranger Scouts have actively reinforces these tendencies. What's the correction to that? Or what happens when somebody is raised in this society and they're not really that image of the ideal that they're raised to believe in? It's still aspirational for them, but there's, in this case, in kids' case, there's very clearly a divide. And I think our creative team has done some really interesting stuff, kind of approaching that from very different angles. And so I think this book feels a lot more like a jam band than anything I've worked on before. And I think it's been a really fun and exciting experience. Not unlike being on a roller coaster, this is sort of, it's my first book with Aftershock and hopefully not my last. And just working with this level of creative team, it's been really exciting.
Well, another image that just came to mind when you said the tattered American flag would be an old episode of the original Star Trek. Mm-hmm. With the Combs and the Yanks, where they were mispronouncing every word in the We the People document there.
Yeah. Well, I love this idea. When I was in college, or no, I was in high school, my history teacher had us read Howard Zinn, People's History of the United States. And for me, it was really eye-opening. I was kind of like, oh, this is not any sort of history that I've ever been taught. And yeah, just the idea of, these sort of so-called historians, way out in the future, totally getting the modern day wrong. That was interesting to me. I mean, there's a little bit of like a Lord of the Flies kind of element there, but also just, we instinctively try to make meaning out of the world. That's just how human beings are hardwired. That's why narrative is so important to us and continuity is so important to us. And yeah, the idea of that continuity getting disrupted, just getting completely severed. And it would have to take, a cataclysmic event like a nuclear holocaust. But then seeing, well, how do we construct meaning and narrative in the aftermath of that? What do we attach ourselves to and what do we find meaning in? And I think some of it also speaks to, like I've been a fan of post-apocalyptic work. Mad Max, Fallout is kind of that's my sort of nerd obsession. I love those games. I can't play them anymore. I love those games so much. I would literally get no work done if I continue to play Fallout. But even things like Handmaid's Tale, or the Hunger Games, which kind of approach dystopias from very different angles. We kind of hit that Venn diagram nicely, I think. And I think a big common trait in all of these is seeing how women have this strength about them. And that they're able to kind of, even when they're in societies that naturally underestimate them, how they're able to really kind of shore up that inner strength and just get it done. And I think that speaks to, I grew up with kind of a trailblazing feminist mother. She really she broke a lot of boundaries in academia in the 70s when she was growing up. Didn't take my father's name, which is kind of like a big deal back then. And so I think I've always been kind of raised with, women being the deadliest of the species, so to speak. And so I think the idea of having female leads who can carry an action story on their backs, that never seemed counterintuitive to me. If anything, I think that's something I kind of gravitate towards. And I think, luckily for me, I think pop culture has never particularly served women well in the action movie genre. It's been very sporadic. You know, you can talk about Laurie Strode or Sarah Connor or Sarah Ripley, but like they're almost like the exceptions that prove the rule. And so it's been kind of,
they're all named Sarah.
Yeah, well, and it's just been gratifying to be able to kind of operate in that narrative space a bit. And you know, just sort of, you know, dating back to my first books, you know, the conversations I had with my artist Jorge Santiago Jr., it made me realize, like, I always kind of ask myself, like, you know, would this story have any unintentional negative stereotypes if we had a woman or a person of color as a lead? And if not, why not? You know, why not go for it? And so I think having Kit and Des as a woman and a person of color as our leads, I think that's it makes our book just a little bit more different in sort of the pop culture pantheon. And I think, you know, it's a baby step in the right direction, but I think every baby step counts.
Now, I don't know the details on it, but I know Aftershock just announced the end of the middle of last month, I believe, a deal with a online retailer, a group of online retailers, because it is kind of like the Borg of online comic shops, and led by Jen King out in Texas, and
I love Jen. She's wonderful.
And Jesse James out in Arizona.
He's great too.
Their whole pantheon of online comic book stores. So they've got Aftershock announced an exclusive deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't have full confirmation yet on store exclusives. I do know that my buddy Mon House, who has done variant covers for all of my series, Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, the OZ, I know he is doing a store variant that I'm aware of. I don't know what, if any, what others might be down the pipeline. I do know that there is a really cool incentive cover as well by Brett Schoonover. I don't know off the top of my head what the numbers are for those incentive covers. But yeah, he's got a kind of a fun cover as well that really kind of homages an old school Boy Scout manual. So yeah, it's just been, it's working with a nice group of talented people to get some fun incentives in people's hands, alongside the merit badges that we've been working on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it was slipping my mind, but it's the Comic Book Shopping Network.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I've heard great things about them. And yeah, Jen and Jesse are both just wonderful ambassadors for independent comic creators. They have both been incredibly supportive of my past work. I believe I've got a big shipment of the OZ that I'm sending to Jen next week. So yeah, they're just, terrific bunch of people. And I think it goes to show, just like we've been talking about kind of dystopias and apocalypses lately, I feel like that's something that the comics industry has kind of had to existentially tackle this year. And seeing retailers really kind of coming together, not just to support indie creators, although that is a huge important thing, but also just kind of kind of uniting for their own fortunes and figuring out, all right, with foot traffic reduced, with publishing schedules kind of in flux and up in the air, and releases being kind of staggered out now over the next year and change, retailers finding unique avenues to connect with readers and to be able to kind of really do the work of selling books. I couldn't be more grateful as a creator for all their hard work. I feel like there are a lot of books on the stand, so I'm always grateful when a retailer kind of picks mine out. People like Mike Wellman over at Atomic Basement in Long Beach, or Ryan Leibowitz at Golden Apple Comics, just to name a couple. It's just seeing the retailers kind of thinking outside of the box. It's something we've all had to do in the comics industry. I think from press to retailers to comic creators. And just seeing what the cool stuff that they've been doing with the Comic Shopping Network. It's been very inspiring and very heartening for me as a creator, for sure.
Yeah, it threw me a bit when I was reading up on this, and I'm like, oh, Scout's Honor isn't from.
Yeah, isn't from Scout.
Isn't from Scout. I'm like,
it's funny.
And I thought it was weird when I was first thinking that it was, because I go, well, that's kind of cocky, letting them name a book after the publisher. And I'm like, oh, nope. It's not. It's Aftershock. Okay.
I keep joking that maybe this is like the Pruitt brothers' way of like pulling a prank on each other. I'm friends with Charlie Stickney, the co-publisher over at Scout, and so I told him when we announced this book, I told him that I promised I would pitch him a book called Aftershock, just to get back at them. But it's just been it's been fun. I think this is definitely a bigger playing field than I'm used to operating on. All of my books previously have either been through Action Lab or self-published via Kickstarter. And so it's been a really great learning experience for me as a creator, kind of taking that next step up to the next level. And working with a place like Aftershock, it's I feel like it's been a great experience for me, because now I know you can put me on the plate and I won't choke. This book, not only did I write it during a very trying time in, our history around us. I mean, I don't understand how a lot of people get creative work done in this. I mean, but the fact that also this was one of the fastest series that I've ever put together. I think we finished the script and the whole thing within a couple of months. It was really just kind of off to the races, because I said to myself, this is the first, I don't want to let Mike Martz down. And so I am going to get this book out as fast as humanly possible, while still making sure that it is, up to the level of quality that I want my name attached to, but getting the book out in as timely a fashion to make sure that I give Luca enough time to breathe, and to make sure that if anything goes wrong on the scheduling, because of course it's comics, people burn their lead times constantly, but that's not going to be because of me. And so, it's, this is going to be an experience that I take with me for the rest of my career, because I know that at the end of the day, I can do the job. This has killed any last vestige of imposter syndrome I might have, because I know that if you put me in play, coach, I will get a book done. And I think it's a good lesson to learn as an indie creator.
So what's it like learning what a deadline is again?
Thankfully, I feel like that part I never lost too much. Thanks to, I got my start as a newspaper reporter, so like that was always kind of baked into me. And then, up until recently, I think I wrapped up my 12-year tenure at Newsarama. I wrapped up there, I believe it was in August. And so that was really kind of baked into me. And one of the many reasons that I knew that this was time to kind of hang up my hat and ride off into the sunset was because of this book. I had kind of successfully avoided conflict of interest for a while because, working at a place like Action Lab, we didn't really have a whole lot of overlap there. We weren't getting review copies from them. I wasn't regularly reviewing their work. Nobody at the site was regularly reviewing their work. So it was easy to kind of say, not having a conflict of interest. But because of Scouts Honor and a few other projects that are sort of will be announced hopefully in 2021 and beyond, it was becoming very clear that I couldn't wear both hats for much longer. But as a result, I've always been keenly aware of a deadline. And if anything, maybe this is sort of my own anxiety as a creator. When I take a long time developing something, but the moment that anybody else is attached to the project, I suddenly am like, it becomes like a game of hot potato where I'm like, I got to get this thing out of my hands. Like I'm like, okay, this thing has to get done. And so as a result, usually it takes me a little while to kind of build up that momentum to have the pitch ready and to have the full outline and have the first issue script before I even start approaching an art team. But for Scouts Honor, it was sort of thrown into the deep end very quickly. This is getting into the weeds a little bit, but different publishers want different things for your pitching. Some people want a full creative team already assembled. They want anywhere from 6 pages to a full issue to a full miniseries already done. Other places don't want a creative team attached. They want to kind of build that with you. And Aftershock is one of those latter places. And so I just sent them log lines at first. Scouts Honor just, was a 2-sentence pitch. And they're like, that's the one we like. And similar to my first book, Spencer and Locke, where somebody's like, yeah, let's pick that up. It's like, oh crap, I got to write this book now. It wasn't until I wrote an outline over the course of the next few weeks that I was like, okay, this book is starting to shift a little and it's starting to really kind of take its final structure. But even then, it wasn't until the book got picked up and approved that I realized that there were all sorts of things that I wanted to add into the mix that I hadn't even thought of in the initial outline. The Switchblades, for example, that we were talking about, that was a fairly late addition to the mix. There's a little bit of a subplot that we've added in, sort of what's the Ranger Scouts' greater mission? Because they know instinctively, there's survival, but how do you thrive in the wasteland? And so there's a little bit of a backstory into what's the long-term goals of the Scouts here beyond just day-to-day survival. And that really only got added in kind of at the 11th hour. And it was sort of a thing that really kind of made the whole piece click together in my mind. But I had already written a significant chunk of the series before I realized, I got to add this thing back in issue 2 because that's going to set up something that's going to pay off in issue 5. But yeah, it's definitely that's my neurosis as a creator, is that the moment that anybody else is attached, whether it's an editor or a publisher or an art team, suddenly it's no longer like daydream mode. It's not blue sky anymore. Now it's, okay, somebody's counting on me. And so I need to get this thing in their hands, in their inbox, and off my plate as fast as humanly possible. Otherwise, my lifetime supply of Jewish guilt will just crush me from the inside out.
Well, there is a phrase I have not heard in a long time.
Oh, that's I wake up and go to sleep with that phrase. So yes, that is part of who I am. That is part of how I live my life. But and I think in certain ways, I think you might see it even a little bit in Scouts Honor. Yeah, I think I certainly a year and a half ago when I first sent this logline to Aftershock, I certainly didn't expect to write about a post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cult. I certainly didn't expect to kind of imprint my own kind of religious awakening and spiritual journey onto it. And I certainly didn't expect to feel inspired by it. And yet here we are. And I think that's something that's a common thread through a lot of my work, which I think often veers towards the darker side, at least in terms of high concept and tone. It's like that line in The Dark Knight, it's always darkest before the dawn. And I feel like when you have these sort of darker starting points, whether it's, just in terms of a concept, or if it's even more tonally, like some of my other work, that makes that sort of redemptive arc shine that much brighter. I feel like it's not where you start that's most important in a story. It's the journey and where you wind up. And I think that redemptive core is something that I have in a lot of my work. And I think Scout's Honor, in a lot of ways, despite being a post-apocalyptic book, I think it's probably the most hopeful thing I've ever written. And so I'm excited for readers to get to meet Kit and Dez and Scoutmaster Shepard and really kind of get to explore the Colorado Badlands through the eyes of the Ranger Scouts.
See, a couple things you said were kind of like opposites for me.
Uh-huh.
Not the book wise, but
sure.
Your newsrama.
Yeah.
When you were doing,
I was doing reviews. I was the reviews editor for over a decade.
And you were doing, your books at Action Lab.
Yep.
You're like, well, we never got review copies here. I go, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, I go, well, we got review copies over here at Outright Geekery. But you know who we don't get review copies from?
Oh,
Aftershock.
All right. We'll make sure we get you a copy when the book hits, because we will take every review we can get. Just as well as anybody, it's always a fight to kind of get the word out on indie books.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for anybody who's ever been a fan of my work, supporting Scout's Honor, it's really important. This is, like I've said, this is sort of the next step in my career. And, I've had a great time working with Aftershock, and I think they've liked working with me too. But it never hurts to kind of have that support shown just by sheer numbers. But at the same time, this is probably the worst thing to say while promoting a book. The thing is, for me, numbers has always been secondary. It's always been, what's a book that I can go to sleep at night knowing my name's on? And that's something that's really kind of guided every book that I've worked on. Sometimes that means I put myself through the ringer when other creators might not. But I think the end product always speaks for itself. And so, yeah, I think, ultimately we just want to get the word out about this book. And I feel like this team has really been killing themselves to put out a really stellar piece of work. And so, so that's, anybody who's been a fan of my work, we really invite you to call your comic shop and pre-order it, but also just give us a shot, check it out. I think you'll find a lot to love.
I also, while we were talking, pulled up the PR from CBSN and Aftershock because it turns out it was October 29th when this hit.
Oh, nice.
So your book should definitely be part of this. And as I read through some old PR, because back on October 29th, this was breaking news from Aftershock and CBSN, the Comic Book Shopping Network, which I am not only a fan of, I am a customer of. And I, for one, can tell you what they do is they have multiple stores that are brought into the Comic Book Shopping Network that change their entire way of doing business,
Mm-hmm.
where they're online having live sales daily, like every single one of these shops. They're online like at least 5 days a week
Yep.
doing online sales, and they have to conform to rules to be in the comic book shopping network. But CBSN and the aforementioned Aftershock Comics have partnered up unprecedented access to beautiful exclusive covers for upcoming projects, including the future mega hit Kaiju score that
Yes.
that just came out. That's doing exceptionally well, and there were a few stores that sadly got damaged copies, but I understand that title from Aftershock is well already into a second print. So obviously it's doing quite well. With CBSN, they are getting easy access to information about Aftershock and what's coming up in the future, and advertising and exclusive back, easy access to back issues, and it's the first big online retailer push, I believe, with Aftershock outside of just being a regular independent publisher in the previews catalog. So this is a big move. So it looks like there will be an exclusive of your book, because this was announced
Ooh.
back in October. So I'm sure going forward they will have an exclusive of.
That's good to know.
A little kit and caboodle there, shall we say?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, honestly, like this book, it has taken a village to put together. This is not the kind of book or the kind of scale that I think I'd be able to put together on my own. And so, yeah, I've been just really grateful to all the hard work that Aftershock has done in putting this book together, and all the support that we've gotten from our retailers, who have been so kind as to give a shot to this crazy book, because yeah, I think it's very different than anything else that's out there, but I think that's part of its charm. And yeah, and I can tell you, especially people who have picked up my Kickstarter book, the OZ. I think the OZ and Scout's Honor, they really are kind of a nice shot and chaser to one another. I do think of them as sister titles in a lot of ways. And so, if you like one, you'll definitely love the other, and vice versa, I think.
I shot you the link for the little PR thing from
Nice.
Geekery to your Twitter page.
Perfect. I'm gonna read that over right now. Yeah, but yeah, it's just been it's been a wild ride. Since this book was announced. I'm actually let's see when they actually announced Scout's Honor. I'm looking it up now. So yeah, they announced it end of September. And it's wild as a creator. So much of it is kind of like time travel. You think of a concept and then you write it out, and then you spend the better part of a year waiting for the art to come in, and eventually you announce it, and then later after that it goes into pre-orders, and then later after that it hits comic shops. And so it's been a really kind of a wild, sometimes discombobulating journey, because yeah, it's like I have emails with Lee Kramer dating back years, getting to this point. And I think that's a thing that I know I certainly got this wrong a lot as a journalist, and it's something that only as a creator that I've really kind of come to appreciate, is the comics industry. Time works funny here. It's hurry up, or it's not hurry up and wait. It's wait and then hurry up. It's sometimes it takes a really long time for something to come out, but then by the time that people are reading it, the train's on the tracks. There's no changing any of it. Or if there is any opportunity to change, it's very minimal, and it's not an issue 1 to issue 2 change. It's an issue 1 to issue 5 change, maybe. But yeah, I think it's just been it's always an interesting way. It's always interesting to try to market and publicize your work, and there is certainly a degree of a sort of time dilation when it comes to the production and then announcement and then actual marketing of a book, for sure.
And I wanted to touch, because the last time you were on, we were talking about the OZ.
Yep.
So tell us how, because I know you're doing fulfillment now.
Yeah.
And as talking during the little pre-show thing, we know that you're not just trying to hurry up and get these books out to everybody that supported you for the OZ, but you're trying to hurry up and getting packed out and sent out before your new puppy arrives.
Yes. Our family's growing tomorrow. We will be adding the pitter patter of little puppy feet to our apartment the same week that all of my Kickstarter books arrived, all 1,000 pounds of them. So yes, we've been hard at work, bagging and boarding, packing, labeling, and shipping. As of this evening, I should say, all 2,700 items that we will be shipping to our backers have been bagged and boarded and sorted. So now, tomorrow I'm picking up a dog, so I'm not doing any packing. I'm just going to make sure that my apartment stays standing. But after that, it's just it'll be sorting everybody's individual orders. It'll be putting them in our Gemini mailers, and in certain cases, our priority mail envelopes and or boxes, and then just printing out all of our shipping labels and dropping them off at the post office. So yeah, we should probably we'll probably be starting our initial shipping. Hopefully it'll start sometime this coming week. And yeah, it's fun, it's crazy. Being a comics creator, life is always a little bit of chaos. And I think being a professional dog dad, that's always a little bit of chaos in the mix as well. It feels fitting in a way. This pandemic for me really started with my dog passing away. And it kind of feels like turning the corner, getting a new puppy. But yeah, it's a great capstone to the OZ's first Kickstarter campaign. I've been so excited by the initial response to our book. We've already shipped out all of our digital rewards. So anybody who has backed the campaign, who is itching to know what the story is, they can read it now. Yeah, it's just been a wonderful experience. I've said I am committed to fulfilling the entirety of the OZ on Kickstarter. If we end up making any deals with any interested publishers down the line, that's going to be secondary. Although no deals are currently in the works. Because the Kickstarter community has been really amazing. They took an idea that a lot of publishers showed interest in, but couldn't kind of get the let out to actually come to terms with. They backed it wholeheartedly. And I think this is some of my best work. I think artist Ruben Rojas is just an incredible collaborator and partner and co-creator on this book. I've told him I will work with him until the wheels come off. He is just that incredible. I've been fortunate, I get to work with a lot of 1 in a million artists, and I feel very fortunate that I'm able to find people like Ruben or Jorge Santiago Jr. or Luca Casalanguida. Yeah, Ruben's hard at work on the next installment now. He has sent me some pages already for our next chapter that look amazing, while he's kind of wrapping up the last of the commission work that he so graciously offered to do for our campaign. And Yeah, the whole series is written, so thankfully that's kind of a load off my shoulders. I get to just kind of watch the cool art come in. But yeah, I'm just excited to get these books out of my apartment. I think we had something like 36 boxes come in via shipping pallet. And so, yeah, the vast majority of them now are in bags and boards. We've saved a few for future Kickstarters down the road. But yeah, it's just, the hard work is over of the creation. Now it's just really kind of nose to grindstone, brute force, packing and shipping and packing and shipping and packing and shipping. And yeah, so my life is Kickstarter books in one room and puppy in another and my bed in another. And that's just going to be my life for the next few weeks. But it's a pretty good life.
And a pallet out in the garage.
Yeah, a pallet out in the garage. So, pretty nice life. I got no complaints. And yeah, a few other projects that are, coming together. My upcoming sci-fi book, Grand Theft Astro. We've got Pedal to the Metal on that. Artist Jordi Perez is in high gear, working on our second issue now. So he's really kind of revving up. I've got a superhero one shot called Roxy Rewind that I'm working on with my Spencer and Locke partner in crime, Jorge Santiago Jr. It's about a teenage superhero who happens to be the child of a drive-through waitress from the 1950s and a time-traveling scientist from the year 2200. They have raised her in our present to split the difference. And she can manipulate time up to 60 seconds. So what happens when a bad guy from outside of the time stream tries to take over her father's lab? Well, a new superhero for the ages arrives. So that's a really exciting book that we will have that as part of the big hype anthology that I believe will be on Kickstarter early 2021. But yeah, we just wrapped up the artwork on that this morning. So that's very exciting. And yeah, just a few other scripts that I will be hunkering down on once we get this puppy potty trained. That's really just my next creator-owned project at this point, is making sure
a superhero book is a little outside the norm for you.
Yeah, and I love superheroes. My thinking was, though, in a world where Marvel and DC and Valiant exist, I never wanted to do a superhero concept unless I had a good twist on it. And I think Roxy is a character that actually predates Spencer and Locke. This is a concept that I've had for a very long time in the works. I actually wrote it as a cartoon pilot back before I really committed to the idea of maybe I should write comics. It's a character that I've wanted to play with for a long time, and I've never really found the opportunity until I was invited by the Big Hype Anthology to do a 20-page story. And so I knew that Jorge Santiago Jr. was the man for the job. I've never thrown him a challenge that he's backed away from. He is just a real artist and a true wonderful collaborator. And this was kind of a nice way to really kind of marry our two artistic styles. I grew up with superheroes. That's sort of the language I speak. He grew up with manga, and that's sort of his go-to. And we were kind of really able to combine these influences in a way that is really fun. It's really different tonally than anything that I've worked on in the past. It's certainly more lighthearted. It's definitely my love letter to classic Spider-Man, to time travel sci-fi like Back to the Future, all ages animation like Kim Possible. It's just it's a fun series that I think in a lot of ways it's the next step of that immigrant story that we see going all the way back to the beginning with Clark Kent. Juniper Wells is Roxy Rewind's civilian alter ego, and she's sort of this first generation child of two immigrants, and her parents are not just not from around here geographically, but they're not from around here temporally. They're from two totally different eras, and so you kind of get this sense of they're kind of figuring out their path in the 21st century, and Juniper as their child, as an awkward teenage high schooler, she really kind of has to find herself and her path, and how does she kind of navigate the world in a way that honors both of her parents' heritage, but also kind of speaks to who she is as a person and her interests. And so the idea of having a sci-fi roller derby drive-through waitress kind of mashup superhero, that's really fun. And I think that really kind of speaks, it gives Juniper a real nice dimensionality as a character, and really makes her somebody that you want to root for. So it's been a blast working with Jorge on this, and we're working with letterer Jim Campbell. This is going to be a black and white story in this anthology. This anthology is black and white. But never say never about doing a color remaster down the road. I know Jason Smith is always a wonderful collaborator on Jorge's line work. So who knows? Maybe down the line we'll get to see Roxy in living color as well.
It sounds interesting. Ryan Pond has joined us in the chat saying,
that sounds cool. Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. It's this idea, like all of my favorite ideas, it's been a long time coming. And this all goes back to sort of the time dilation of comics. Pitching, it's so much worse. I have ideas that you're not going to see probably for another 5 years. It's just, that's how long it takes to pitch it and get the right art team and get the publisher attached and get the thing done and then get it in previews and then get it in the stores and get it in your hands. I've got a laundry list of stuff that I want to work on, and every book that I do, I cross things off my bucket list, but I seem to always add more things than I've crossed off. And so, that's a fun way to live your life. It certainly makes every project different. And I think that kind of keeps me from feeling stale or getting bored as a creator. And I think being able to kind of keep shifting gears, for example, from a post-apocalyptic Boy Scout cult to a teenage time travel superhero, that kind of keeps me limber as a creator. And I think that always lets me rise to the challenge of bringing my best work.
Or even better yet, a brand new puppy in the middle of a Kickstarter fulfillment.
That's right. Yes, plan on seeing plenty of photos in my social media on the drive back, for sure. Let's see. I like that you have an idea that you marinated on. Superhero stuff needs to be worked through for some time to get right in the modern marketplace. Absolutely. And maybe this speaks to my spiritual side a little bit, but I feel like sometimes things are not meant to happen until they happen. I know that's a little Zen, but I've said for a long time, my only regret in my career is that I didn't start sooner. But at the same time, Spencer and Locke was the book that I was meant to start my career on. And there is no way that I was fully baked as a person enough to make that book until I did. I could not have made that book a year earlier, and I think that's the case for a lot of books. I think the OZ, for example, wouldn't have worked coming right on the heels of Spencer and Locke. I needed to have Spencer and Locke 2 and Going to the Chapel and, the announcement of Grand Theft Auto. I needed to have more stuff in the pipeline to show that I'm not just a one-trick pony, that I'm not just the guy that's going to do dark parodies of childhood classics, although I do love doing them. I've got other concepts that I would not have been able to tackle before now, and even, I'm working on Spencer and Locke 3, and I'm so glad that I did not go straight from volume 2 to volume 3, because I feel like I've grown so much as a creator since that second volume that, I've written, I think I've written 5 books since then. And so I know as I'm working on volume 3 and I'm kind of chiseling away at it, that this work feels even stronger as a result. And so, yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to, yeah, like you say, things happen when they happen for a reason. And you're exactly right. Luck is the crossroads between preparedness and timing. I mean, you keep taking swings and you don't really know what will connect when. But if you just keep taking the swings, that's really the important thing, I think, as a creator. I'll always keep swinging. So far it's served me well.
Well, definitely, because and Spencer and Locke fans should be excited now that they know that there's a third volume coming in the future. And
Garfield versus Peanuts for volume 3. So that'll be a fun one. Just a lot of research going into it. I'm not just rereading all of Bill Watterson like I did for the past 2 volumes, but I am also reading all of Peanuts and Garfield, which is a lot. So, but it is coming. We are working on it. It will happen, I promise.
So, lots of lasagna versus missed field goal kicks.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of imagery to fit in there and to fit in a coherent fashion. It's a lot, but I feel confident that we'll be able to pull it all off.
So there's always a lot of stuff in the pipeline, and you, of course, as a creator, are the biggest consumer of your work, and
sure,
you like to perfect it in your eyes, and which is never an easy feat.
No, never.
Ask any artist, music wise. Ask any guitar player.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. And there's other things that are coming out. I'm working on a short with my pal Mon House, who's done variants on all of my series. I've promised him for years that I would find a project to do interior art sequentials with him, and so we're working on a kind of a horror infused action story for an upcoming anthology that I think will be announced sometime next year. And then just working on a few scripts. Spencer and Locke 3. I'm working on my first horror series. I was hoping to have the first issue written before the puppy arrived. That did not happen. So I'm hoping I will have that ready hopefully by end of the year. Another horror pitch that I'm just sort of starting to develop. I wrote it as a short, but I realized after the fact that it would be a much cooler miniseries. So I'm just sort of expanding that and have a couple art friends who I want to reach out to about that. That's the thing about comics is that, you may have stuff coming out in any particular moment, but this is all stuff that's been in the pipeline for months, if not years. And so you're already working on stuff that's going to come out a year or two from now. And that's cool. And when you start adding Kickstarter into the mix, where you don't have to find the publisher and you don't have to, you can really just kind of release it whenever you feel ready. It's a lot of balls in the air, but it sure beats having an honest job. I've worked plenty of office jobs and done poorly enough in enough office jobs that the comics industry is not getting rid of me. I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. And I feel like at the beginning of Scout's Honor, the whole world felt like a scary place and the future felt very uncertain. And now it feels like we're turning a corner. And maybe that's just me getting a puppy talking. But I feel genuinely hopeful and genuinely excited for the future. And I think that's what we ultimately should be feeling. And maybe that's the energy that I was worried about putting out with Scout's Honor is, that's what dystopias, that's what post-apocalyptic stories are at their core, is it's fear of the future. And I think by the time you finish this series, you'll realize the future is not something to be scared of. It's something to be embraced. And I'm excited to embrace that. And I'm excited to see what comes next.
So from various things you've said, it makes me wonder if you're going to be running for political office so you two can go eat at a restaurant sometime this year.
I'll leave to the politics to the professionals. For me, it's all
if you
about
can call them that.
Yeah, for me, I like telling stories. I like telling stories that that speak to me, that speak to my partner. She's my first reader, and if she's happy with it, I'm happy with it. And beyond that, it's just kind of just having fun with it, trying to take different twists on stuff that I haven't seen before, or if I see storytelling tricks that I like, trying to figure out how I can put my own spin on it. I've got an idea for a Groundhog Day kind of pitch that I think is kind of unique and kind of cool, and that's sort of on my to-do list for 2021. When we're done here, I'm going to watch that new Vince Vaughn movie, Freaky. Because now I'm like super jealous of that concept, and I'm kind of like, ooh, what kind of twist on a Freaky Friday could I do that would like be cool and unique and make sense? But yeah, I just, I want to be as responsible as I can as a creator. I think maybe that's as far as I take it, as far as my politics go, is that I want to make sure that I'm considerate and empathetic to my readers, and to see, I know I cannot speak authentically to either a minority or a woman or a person of the LGBTQ community. I cannot speak authentically to their life experiences, but what I can do is to try to kind of like invite people to the table and, sort of expand representation in my own work. I think that is the least I can do. It's very low impact for me as a creator. And beyond that, I think, look, the comics industry, we don't have enough people to turn people away. The whole goal for me is, how can I invite more people to the table? And how can I sort of bring that direct market diaspora with the Kickstarter diaspora, with the people who buy things digitally, and the people who, God willing, will be able to go back to cons sometime, hopefully when it's safe. Bringing sort of those disparate readerships together at the same table and inviting them to break bread together, that's everybody's responsibility. Everybody needs to do that to the best of their abilities, to whatever capacity they can. The advantage that I have is, as a creator, I get to really have a lot of fun doing it. And, books like Scout's Honor, you wouldn't think a post-apocalyptic Boy Scout book could also be a book about feminism and toxic masculinity and religion, and yet it is. That's been kind of sometimes you don't even know the themes until you've written it. But that's kind of the fun part about being a creator, I think. And so I appreciate everybody who's, listening to this interview, and all the retailers who've supported the book, and all the fans who have come out and supported my work. It really takes a village to have any sort of success in this industry. And I couldn't be more grateful to every single person who's helped me get where I am today.
And Scout's Honor comes out the very beginning, first new comic book day of 2021. Yes.
January 6th. So call your local comic shop.
And, just to throw it out there, because, this has been a hell of a sucky year. Unless you're a comic book fan, then it's been great, because there's been tons of good stuff to read. And very soon, many people will be reading The Oz.
Yep.
The OZ.
Yes.
And but I thought it was funny that you've got a post-apocalyptic book coming out the first week of 2021, which is the same year that the original Mad Max starts.
That's right. I hadn't even thought about that.
It's going to be over. Yeah, wait till you see what's around the corner.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I feel like I was nervous getting into this book. And I think if you had asked me at the beginning of this year if I would have wanted to do a post-apocalyptic book, I probably would have been like, I don't know. But that's the thing is, sometimes circumstances happen to you and you have to kind of choose how you face it. And I'm really glad that I did. I'm glad that I wrote this book because I came into it feeling a lot of trepidation and I came out of it feeling really optimistic. And I hope the readers feel the same way.
Sometimes you don't find the work finds you.
Exactly. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, I promise. And until then, we all got to stick together. And if a little bit of post-apocalyptic action is what's going to get you to the finish line, then hope you enjoy Scout's Honor. Tell your local comic shop to add all 5 issues to your pull list.
Oh yeah. Why don't you throw those codes out there again for pre-orders?
So issue 1 pre-order code, you can pre-order it through December 14th, that Monday. It's NOV for November 200-994, and you can also pre-order issue 2 now. The code for that is DEC for December 2011-33. That's DEC 201133.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and talking all things comics and puppy and stuff like that, because puppies are always awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And anybody who wants to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, it's right here, Pepose D. You can also follow David Pepose Comics on Facebook or subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/Pep News.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us again. We will look forward to this and all the merit badges that I can get to come with them.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thanks.